Our next program will be in 2 weeks, and it'll be David Crawford. He's written a book about Robert Kennedy and the 1968 campaign. And we have several photos of Robert Kennedy in Plattsmouth, so we'll have those on Zoom that day also. And we're happy to have Robert Hrabik with us today, and he's going to be talking about the fishes of Nebraska. Thanks for coming.
You're most certainly welcome. Thank you for inviting me. A little louder?
Yes, please.
You're fine. You're good.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, first of all, a little bit about myself. I am a native Nebraskan. I was born and raised what they considered to be Omaha at the time, but is now called Bellevue up on Chandler Road. Went to school at high school at Omaha Bryan High School, and attended the University of Nebraska-Lincoln for my undergraduate degree. Met someone at college, had a bunch of kids, decided I better go get a job. There weren't any in Nebraska at the time, and so I ended up in Missouri, working for the Missouri Department of Conservation. And I spent most of my career in Missouri, working on the Mississippi River and some of the large rivers in that state. Learned a lot there, but I kept close ties with my colleagues and friends in Nebraska all these years, and it led ultimately to the culmination of this book that I'm going to tell you a little bit about and teach you a little bit about some things about Nebraska fishes you may not know today. So, with that introduction, the general well, first of all, that's a photograph of the copy of the book. It was published by an outfit in Kansas. The general outline that I have for this talk today is I want to relate to you, well, how many fish species are there in Nebraska? How does that compare to other states surrounding us? Why does Nebraska have more or fewer fish species than surrounding states? And I'm going to follow this up with a gallery of photographs I've taken of Nebraska fishes. So I did my own photography work for this book, and I did similar photography for a Fishes of Missouri book that's not out yet, but is under review. So with that introduction, okay, let's try that. Nebraska, there are about 100 species of fish that inhabit the state. You'll notice then that in this map I put the number of fish species found in surrounding states. For example, South Dakota has 127, Iowa 150, but if you go off to the west, there's fewer fish species as you go towards the Rocky Mountains. Then if you take a little peek down into the southeast, you notice that Missouri has double the number of fish species than the state of Nebraska. And my question to any of you, studious folks, got any idea why that might be so? Why so many, why so few number of fish species in the Midwest and as you go west, but then you see that the numbers jump quite a bit to the southeast?
They have more lakes, don't they?
That's actually not true. They do have some large reservoirs in a place like Missouri, but many of you may not know that Nebraska is blessed with many natural lakes, many natural wetlands and playas.
Cold water, warm water.
Cold water and warm water. True. Although Nebraska has cold water fisheries, trout fisheries, and especially in the western part of the state. So that's partially the answer, but there's a little bit more. Anybody else got an idea?
Sandy bottoms.
Sandy bottoms, that's kind of part of it. That's kind of part of it. What is it that everybody notices about Nebraska, especially going down Interstate 80?
It's flat.
It's flat. And it's flat because why?
Flat
River.
What? Somebody said the Platte River, that's part of it. But what happened geologically? Glaciers, yes. The glaciers came through the Midwest. It's what created, eventually, through the foundation of leveling, winds that came out of the Rocky Mountains, water, a lot of water that came out of the Rocky Mountains. Nebraska became a flatland. It became the prairie that everybody talks about, and we have television shows on all the time about crossing that endless prairie. People today still comment about the endlessness of Interstate 80. I remember one time I was driving down the road and I looked over and somebody in their car had a placard pasted across the side. It said, "Never ending Nebraska." So one of the reasons that Nebraska, the Midwest, has far fewer species is glaciers came down here and rearranged the landscape. It caused the Missouri River to flow a different direction. At one time, the Missouri River, and the Platte River for that matter, flowed to the Red River of the North and went into Canada and Lake Winnipeg, which it still does partially. But these glaciers rearranged everything. And when they rearranged everything, species came, species went, conditions got dry, harsh, and a lot of species that might have existed here at one time perished. And so Nebraska, Kansas, the Midwest, all the prairie regions don't have the number of species because of that geological phenomenon in particular. But there is another reason a place like Missouri has so many species. How many of you have been to Missouri? How many of you have spent time in the Ozarks? That's probably the primary reason you even went to Missouri, was to go to the Ozarks. Everyone calls the Ozarks the mountains. The Ozarks are not the mountains. What the Ozarks are, if you get up high enough on an airplane and you're flying across it at a particular altitude, you notice something, that all of those so-called mountains are flat-topped. So what Missouri is compared to Nebraska, and this is part of this question I'm trying to answer about the species, is Missouri is nothing but an eroded plateau. It's not an uplift. Now there was an uplift in Missouri called the St. Francis Mountains, and there's a little bit of height to those hills that are truly mountains. Most of Missouri was a flat tableland like Nebraska, but never glaciated south of the Missouri River. If you notice, there's a big difference between the Missouri River to the north and the to the landscape south of that Missouri River. That's where all the rugged hills are. The glaciers never made it there. Why is that important? It's very, very, very old. Millions of years old. You get small populations of minnows and darters and other things that live in these places separate from their conspecifics, and eventually they evolve into something, a new species. And you get diversity that way. So Missouri has all these species, these 208 species compared to Nebraska's 103, because they've had a landscape that was never glaciated and took a long time for speciation events to occur. And so they've got all these really cool darters and mad toms and all this really cool stuff down there that Nebraska doesn't have. So that's why you get out towards the west like Colorado, Wyoming, they got the mountain uplift. Yeah, it's great for trout and cool water species, but you don't get all of the other species that came from the east. And Nebraska was inundated with species that came from the east and the southeast after the glaciers retreated because of the Missouri River. So Nebraska has the species that it does have because of its relationship to the Missouri River, which now goes all the way up into the Pacific Northwest and then empties down near St. Louis. So that explains Now, South Dakota is an anomaly. It's like, why does South Dakota, of all places, have more species than Nebraska, fish species than Nebraska? That's because they have pockets of areas that also were never glaciated. The Black Hills, for example. That was never leveled off with the glaciers like the other places. The rerouting of the Missouri and the Platte rivers into the Red River of the North pulled species down out of Canada, and they settled in the wet areas in South Dakota. So they've got a little bump up in species diversity compared to Nebraska. I find that all very interesting. I hope you do too. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm basically going to show you a gallery of Nebraska fishes. We'll talk about some of these species. If you've got any questions about any of them, we'll just work our way through these things. I'm presenting these fish in what are called phylogenetic order. That means something came first and gave rise to something else later. So you'll notice I'll be talking about sturgeons and things like that because they're very, very geologically, biologically old. And they gave rise to other things. So the first, what's on here is up there is not matching. So let's do that. Okay, now I know what I should be looking at. Sorry about that. Okay, the first group of fish that I'd like to introduce you to that are in Nebraska are called the lampreys. The lampreys are very, very prehistoric fish. They look very prehistoric. They lack jaws, but some of them have rasping teeth in their mouths, and they hook onto other fish. And they draw bodily fluids and feed off of them as they're swimming around doing their thing. Many times you'll catch catfish or paddlefish that'll have lampreys attached to them. So they're parasitic, living off of the bodily fluids of other fishes. Nebraska has two species of these lampreys, the chestnut lamprey and the silver lamprey. The silver lamprey is much more aggressive than the chestnut lamprey, but they're both parasitic. The next group of fish, and by the way, all these photographs that you see here, I took these. So these are some pretty cool pictures here. The next group, and we're following along phylogenetically now, this is the Asapanceridae, the sturgeons. Nebraska is represented by a couple of different sturgeons. The adults get up to, I've seen them 125 to 145 pounds. Even in places like Nebraska. I threw in there also the photograph of the, let's see, that's the next slide. I'll get used to this. There we go. That's what a baby looks like. That's the small lake sturgeon. That one was about yay big when I took that picture. That's what they look like then. And then they grow up to be, let me use the back space here. Then they grow up to be these monstrous fish here. This is a fish that was in a lot of trouble in 25, 30 years ago. States like Nebraska, Missouri, and others have captured the adults, put them into propagation programs, bred them out and raised lots of young, and have been stocking them and reintroducing them to places where they had not existed before. And it's been only in the last couple of years, particularly in Missouri, where they have documented reproduction, spawning, and successful rearing of young lake sturgeons. So they're actually making a comeback because of the efforts of biologists and ecologists to do so. All right, sticking with the sturgeon family, these are the pallid and the shovel-nosed sturgeons. The pallid sturgeon is a federally endangered species. They're right out here in the Platte River. I've caught 2 or 3 of them in the Platte River and over the years, but then there's groups of biologists and scientists that are out studying them all the time, and they've learned the techniques to capture them, tag them. We also had a reproduction program, taking them to hatcheries and rearing young and reintroducing them to various parts of their range. It is a very conspicuous fish species here in Nebraska. Next up are the gars. Most people have a general distaste for gars. They don't like them when they catch them on their hook and line. They think they're bad fish and that they're these horrible, terrible meat eaters. When in fact they're not that at all. They're mostly an opportunist who generally like to clean up on dead things that are other fish that have died, other animals that have fallen in the water and have perished. And so gars are actually ecologically an important species because they're kind of like the garbage man. They pick up the refuse, they take care of it, and those animals get used. What I got showing there is an adult long-nosed gar, and the lower section down there, that's what the juvenile looks like. They're actually quite pretty, with a whitish stripe there along the belly and the black lateral line. Pretty neat fish. Continuing with the gars, these are the more common ones that you see in Nebraska. If we're out fishing out in the Platte River, these are the long-nosed and short-nosed gars. As you can see, the juveniles also have a real pretty black stripe. They're actually really fun to have in an aquarium because they'll strike minnows and bait that you throw in there, and to watch them grow and change. They're pretty cool. Okay, just making sure I'm on the same page. And also, besides, these are more pictures of, this is the long-nosed gar, also showing the juvenile with the black stripe. Notice the interesting looking tail when they're really small. You eventually grow out of that and turn and have a more or less proportional normal tail. Next, fish species that you might encounter in Nebraska, these are actually quite rare. These are called bowfin, family Amiidae. They are also a very prehistoric fish. They predate some of the gar species. They're worldwide in distribution. But in Nebraska we just have this one species. But you get out into the southeastern part of the United States and there's a couple of other forms down there. The next family in Nebraska, these are what are called the moon-eyes. The moon-eyes family, goldeye and the moon-eye. The goldeye is a real common species in Nebraska. If you would go to the Platte or the Elkhorn rivers and just fish with little small spinners like a Mepps spinner or something that's real shiny, especially if you're on a bend in the river where there's a hole or where it goes into a shoal, you can catch these moon-eyes and goldeyes. Moon-eyes are actually more restricted to the Missouri River up by Gavin's Point Dam, but the goldeyes kind of spread all over the place. They're really scrappy. They're fun to catch, especially on lighter tackle. We do have eels in Nebraska. I don't know if folks knew that or not, but freshwater eel used to have fairly substantial runs up the Missouri River prior to when it was channelized, beginning in the 1940s and 50s. You don't see them too much up here anymore, but in the Mississippi River they're still pretty common. What they'll do is when you capture one, and I've captured bunches of these guys, you grab him by the head, and they'll take their body and they'll go around your arm, back and forth into loops all the way up your arm. And they're really slimy. And so, so you're doing one of these things here, and get those off of you after you catch them. Another family that is in Nebraska is rather common are the herring family, the skipjack and the gizzard shad. The gizzard shad is like a primary food source for a lot of fish in our bigger rivers, many of our reservoirs. They have a tendency to get overpopulated, and they utilize a lot of food resources, and so fisheries managers have this love-hate relationship with the shads. They're high protein, very oily. Matter of fact, if you catch them, you use them for bait, you drop them in a 5-gallon bucket. Usually you got a 5-gallon bucket full of oil and stuff that you got to dump out so that you can use them for bait. But they're a very important bait fish. The next family is very, very diverse. It represents the highest number of species found in Nebraska, and this is what was formerly called the minnow family. Taxonomists such as myself and systematists have begun to broke these minnows up into some different groups and different subcategories. I'm going to stick with the old stuff here that follows along with my book, so that if you're interested in following that later, it'll make sense to you, because they're really changing things. But anyway, these are some examples of some minnows that are found in Nebraska. The one that would be on your screen to the upper left is a stone roller, the one with the high fin and the black in the fin there. And they live up to what their name is. They get in these small streams and they build nests out of stones, and you'll see them rolling stones to make a pile of stones to make it. So they're pretty cool. The goldfish in the center is just that. It's the European goldfish brought here to this country when the Europeans came across. There used to be many, many more goldfish in our streams in the Midwest. They kind of have settled back into a particular niche where they're surviving, but they're no longer very common. Used to be back in the 70s when I started my fisheries work, you could go just about anywhere and catch a goldfish in any of these little streams around here. Now they're pretty rare. You don't see them as much. Probably, if you want to see a bunch of them, go over to Schramm Park. There's all kinds of goldfish in their little ponds over there. The really pretty one that's to be to the far on your right upper, that's called a dace. In Nebraska, the daces are a listed species because they require cool spring-fed water, undisturbed shorelines. They occur in some of the same places where we have cattle industries, and so we work with the landowners as much as they'll let us to make sure that the cattle don't over-trample some of these banks, because if they do, it'll affect these dace. They're absolutely stunningly beautiful fish. On that lower row are some other examples of fish, minnows that are found in Nebraska. The one would be on your closest to me here. That's a red shiner. They're ubiquitous. You can catch them just about statewide anywhere, but they're absolutely beautiful aquarium fish. So if anybody's interested in having a native fish aquarium, I would definitely include these red shiners, because they take food well, they swim around looking pretty, and when they're in breeding colors, they're full of dark blues and oranges and reds. They're really, really pretty. The fish in the center, lower center, is a common carp, which came from Germany originally, And as the settlers came in and into this country and did what they did, they brought a lot of carp with them. Interesting thing about carp, again, as I had mentioned to you when I gave my introduction, I worked for many, many years on the Mississippi River bordering Missouri and Illinois. And I watched carp numbers actually start to drop. And we don't understand why. We don't really think that the habitat is getting better or conditions are actually getting better, that carp would no longer compete as well with native species. Not sure what's going on there, but carp numbers seem to be disappearing just about everywhere, except in the sandhills. They have problems up there in the sandhills for some reason. But anyway, yeah. Let's see what else is on there. Yeah, that'll take care of this slide. Here are some more minnows. Generally, minnows are very difficult to identify, especially in the field, because, well, they're all silvery. They all got little speckles or patches on them, and if you're not paying really close enough attention to the distribution of those kinds of features, or you're not looking at some kind of internal organs, sometimes they're kind of difficult to identify. So a lot of people just kind of go, and that's what they do with those guys. But they're very, very important ecologically. They provide food for bigger fish and game species. The next family that I want to introduce you to, these are the suckerfish. These include the buffaloes and lesser suckers. Down in the corner, this guy right here, that's a blue sucker. There's no other member of that genus. The genus is Cycleptus, and it's the only member of that group. And so it's kind of like an evolutionary trail that ended, and it ended up with that fish. And I don't know. We'll see what happens to them through time. But they're a big river fish. Channelization of the Missouri River and Mississippi rivers caused a little bit of problem with those, but they seem to be holding their own. Every once in a while, if you're fishing with worms in the Platte River, you can catch one. And they can get up to, I've seen them 30 inches long anyway. So they're really cool, good fighters. They really tug on your line. The other ones that there are on the screen are the buffalo fishes. Buffaloes are big, large, roaming suckers that travel long distances. We used to tag these fish and put radio tags and other physical tags on them so that if somebody else catches one or a biologist someplace catches one, they can report the information back to us. And sometimes these buffalo fishes will swim 1,000 miles, going to different places, just wandering about, living their lives, making babies, coming back home. So it's pretty neat. Some of these big river fish do travel tremendous distances. The sturgeons, for example, when we were tagging those, we tagged one sturgeon in southeastern Missouri, and it ended up being caught by a fisherman in Salt Creek over here by Lincoln. So they will travel great distances. The next group I want to introduce you to, these are the killifishes. Killifishes and top minnows. Beautiful, great in the aquarium type fish. They're showy, easy to keep. And one thing I wanted to do, and I can't believe I didn't do it, but if you pick up a copy of my book or you take a look at the back of the book, there's a species there called the Plains top minnow. And the Plains top minnow is truly Nebraska's fish. 90% of its range in the world occurs right here in Nebraska. And so, take a look at that when you come up afterwards and look at this picture of these guys. They're absolutely beautiful, stunning with an orange chest and black and white and purplish speckling on the rest of the body. So, yeah, when the Nebraska legislature was considering a state fish, all these states do this stuff. They pick some fish and they decide it's a state fish. My colleagues and I, we tried to push really hard for the Plains top minnow to be the Nebraska state fish because 90% of its range is in Nebraska. But they picked the channel catfish. So go figure, right? So. Sunfishes, probably anybody who, when they fished as a kid, the first thing they caught was a bluegill sunfish or a green sunfish here in Nebraska. Here's a sample of some of the different types of sunfishes that you can find in Nebraska. The one on this one here closest to me on the top, that's a green sunfish. That's a large showy male. The one next to it is actually the fish that we decided to put on the Nebraska book. It's called an orange spotted sunfish. It's just a tiny little sunfish. Rarely gets much bigger than maybe 2 inches. Lives in sandy and silty backwater areas off the main channel where it's kind of slow water, where they can find lots of worms to eat, things like that. But it's an absolutely stunningly beautiful fish when it's in breeding colors. The next one over there, the far on, would be to your right. That's called a pumpkin seed. Pumpkin seed sunfish are really, really common when you get in Minnesota, South Dakota, further north, but they do range into Nebraska. And Nebraska Game and Parks Commission in years past made it an effort to stock them for various reasons from place to place. Probably because they're showy and pretty and people would like to catch something like that. It's a really neat fish though. And of course, the other ones here on the bottom, these are your largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, bluegill, all the big sunfishes that people like to catch. My favorite group of small fishes are the darters. They are by far the most colorful and showy of all of the fishes that you would find in the United States, really, except for the far west. This guy that's up here in this corner, that's called an orange throat darter, or the Plains orange throat darter. I'm working with a group of taxonomists, and we're trying to actually elevate that particular species to what's called full species rank, make it its own species, because they look so much different than the darters. Orange throat darters are in Missouri and further south. So when you do that, you go through, you run genetic tests and all kinds of things. It takes forever to get done, but that's what we're working on with that one. Yellow perch, this guy down here in the corner is a game species. Usually they don't get very big in Nebraska, but sometimes like up at the Valentine Refuge, you can catch some really nice 10 inchers, 11 inchers up there. Go fishing for those. On the bottom, all the way to the right, we got walleye and sauger. Sauger is a relative that's very similar to walleyes. They both taste great. I knew a biologist once. He said, I wanted to do a study on walleyes, and he said, but what I got to do is I have to catch all these walleyes in order to get the age growth information and all the biological information to make management decisions. He said, but I end up killing them. So he started bringing a cooler out and he started flying them and putting them in his cooler. I said, I don't think you should probably do that. So he quit doing it. Nebraska represents the furthest south in the United States where we have a naturally reproducing population of northern pike. That's this guy down here on the bottom. Game and Parks has done a really good job of taking Flanagan Lake here in Omaha and turning it into a northern pike lake. So if any of you folks want to catch some nice northern pike, that's a close place to go, and you can catch some really nice ones. Muskie is up on the upper right-hand side up there. Not native to Nebraska, but they stock them in hybrids between northern pike and muskie, trying to create fisheries. This little guy up here in this corner, though, is one of my favorites. That is called a grass pickerel. And the interesting thing about grass pickerel, well, to me it's interesting anyway, is that Nebraska has one of the largest populations of that species anywhere in the Midwestern United States. The only other place you can find a high number of those is in the southeastern part of the United States, like in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, down in there. So the interesting zoogeographic question is why do we have grass pickerel, a substantial population, clear up in the sandhills in the Elkhorn River drainage, but we don't have them anywhere in between that until you get all the way to southeastern Missouri and further south. So some colleagues and I were actually going to test the hypothesis, how they got there, and then genetically see if we can link them back and see how long ago they diverged. Pretty neat stuff. So Nebraska's got some things that's unique that people don't really know or they don't think about. Catfishes. I was just out yesterday doing some catfishing with my dad and my brothers, and I got some nice pictures of some 10 and 12 pound channel cat we got in Flanagan Lake. They're very, catfishes are the year in, year out rated as the #1 angling fish that most anglers go fishing for is catfish. So it's very important for the state, very important economically. Sell a lot of fishing licenses because of catfish. The ones, though, that really intrigue me the most, or that I like the most, is the one that's in the center top. That's called a tadpole madtom. And it's a small catfish, never gets any bigger than maybe 2-3 inches. Very potent stingers or pectoral fins. So if you grab one wrong and that pectoral fin jabs you, it shoots venom into you and it burns. It really burns a lot. My oldest son, Hrabik, when we lived out at Seward, Nebraska, this was before my Missouri days, I took him out to a creek with a Game and Parks fellow, and he was young. He didn't know what he was doing, and we took a nice big seine haul, and I had a whole net full of tadpole madtoms. Robbie reaches down there and he goes, catfish, and he grabs them, and he has like 6 of them hanging off of his hand. Yeah, he shouted a little bit. But yeah, tadpole madtoms, highly venomous, really burn if they puncture you with their pectoral fins. So, but other than that, they're really a cool little catfish. They live under stones, rocks, twigs. Yeah, if you kick around with a little net in any of the streams, like especially in the Big Blue River, Little Blue River, that area of the state, there's just all kinds of them down there. They're pretty cool. That's all I got for you today.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yes?
What about the Asian carp that's flopping all over the place,
Yeah.
causing headaches for canoers and kayakers, and I know they came up, but
Yeah.
how did they get brought into?
Yeah, they were brought into the United States by the state of Arkansas. Thank you, state of Arkansas, for that. What was going on was the Asian carps, the initial species of Asian carp. There's several different species now that have been brought here, and you will find them in our rivers and streams. But the reason that they brought them here in the first place is because they feed on plankton and zooplankton. And commercial fishing operations in Arkansas were having a lot of trouble with too much algae, floating algae in their water column, and it was affecting the growth of their commercial operations, the commercial fish growth of their commercial operations. And so they coaxed the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service into allowing them to bring in these Asian carp so that they would start cleaning up the algae and phytoplankton in these commercial fish farming ponds. What they didn't anticipate was Arkansas sometimes gets 8 to 10 inches of rain in some of their storms, and it was a massive flood that flooded all of these ponds that had the Asian carps, and they escaped into the Black River and the other river systems in Arkansas, and that's all it took. They just exploded from that point on, and now they're everywhere. Controlling them, there's been all kinds of ways that biologists have been attempting to try to control them, even with just going out and fishing the heck out of them and just taking them out of the system. Nothing works. They're so prolific, they make so many young. They're highly mobile. It's nothing for them to move 30 miles in a day. Again, when I was working in southeast Missouri, we would put tags in these fish to see how far they go. Three days' time, they would be in Dubuque, Iowa, from southeast Missouri. So they just, strong swimmers, highly reproductive, and so they're a problem. There's outfits now that are trying to get people to eat them commercially. So they'll have commercial fishermen go out and collect them and then sell them to Joe's Fish Market or whatever. But people they kind of have this stigma that they're a carp and they don't taste good. So what my staff and I did in southeast Missouri, I'm going to get comfortable here. We did a taste test on these guys. We had crappie, largemouth bass, channel catfish, and Asian carp. And we had a bunch of our friends cook all these fish the exact same way. No difference in how we cooked them. And then we put out dishes with these fish out there, crappies, bass, whatever, Asian carp. But they were just labeled A, B, C, and D, and we didn't tell them what kind of fish they were. And this is no lie. Most people thought the Asian carp tastes better than any of the catfish, bass, even crappies, because most everybody loves crappies. So, getting rid of them, we've tried putting, like you do with mosquitoes, they'll change it so that they're all one sex, and they'll send them out there hoping that they'll mate, but nothing will happen. That hasn't worked. So I think the best thing to do is just go fishing for them. They're wonderful fighters, especially on a fly rod. If you take a fly rod and cotton ball from all these trees we got around here, and you fish them on a fly rod, you'll catch those Asian carp. They'll come up and pound the big bunch of cottonwood seed. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What fish is it? Or maybe it's the Asian carp that you see they just jump out of the water in great numbers at the same time.
Yeah, especially if somebody has a prop and they've just turned on their motor and it makes a big wash, and boy, the carp would just jump all over the place and jump in the boat. I had one last year on the Platte River, just right over here. About a 25-pounder jumped right in the boat, just flew right there, crash, bang, all that stuff. They seem to be very sensitive to the prop noise or whatever unit of measure, decibel, wavelength, whatever, just drives them crazy, and they jump all over the place.
And that is the Asian carp?
Those are these guys, the Asian carp. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes?
So that small catfish that you caught, the one you said sting,
Yeah, Mad Toms.
do you use those for bait?
You can use them for bait. Most people don't because they're not very big. They get maybe way big. But there's a relative called the stone cat, which gets bigger. They get about that big. They're not quite as potent, the venom. You can use those for bait.
Now, the little ones you're talking about, I'm from upstate New York, and we used to go to our small rivers,
Yeah.
and we would walk along in the water, and you'd see those flat rocks,
Yep.
and you'd slowly lift them, and you could see them underneath, and you'd set the rock back down,
Yeah.
you'd take another rock, and you would stun them,
Uh-huh.
and then you would get, that's what we used for bait back there, for walleyes and
Cool.
big bass.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they got what are called stone cats up there
Mhm.
also.
We call them we always call them Tonys, that's what,
Tony's?
Yeah.
Tony's, Stonies?
Yeah.
I see the relationship
Yeah.
there. Yeah. My staff and I, we created this school sidebar real quick. We created a new type of gear. We called it the Missouri Trawl. It's basically like a Bubba Gump fishing trawl that's sized down so that you can catch rare and endangered small fish.
Mhm.
We actually went to Vermont and went to Lake Champlain and all the rivers that
Mhm.
tie into that, and we were after those stone cats.
Yeah.
Yeah, they paid us to come up there and show them how to use that gear. We never fished with them though, but I can see one.
You ever fish without Helgamite?
Sure. Yep, in Missouri, we don't have a lot of Helgramites in Nebraska, but in Missouri, there's lots of them. They're great bait.
You should be able to find those in creeks that have a lot of running water but aren't very deep.
Yeah. Especially if it's
We use
clear,
the, we use
cool.
the same for those all the time.
Yeah. Over where you were from? Yeah. Yeah. They're here too, but you gotta go to the right creeks to find them. Yeah.
That's my search for this year.
Oh, well, there you go. Give me a call. We'll go take a look together.
I'm gonna try to find some.
Yeah, finding stuff. Yes.
What really defines a game fish?
What people like to catch. Yeah. There's southeast Missouri fellas, let's call them. They love buffalo. They said buffalo is awesome. They're fun to catch. We eat them. To them, that's a game fish. Most people consider buffalo a rough fish, not a game fish, but yeah, it's whatever most of the public likes to fish for. It's classified as a game fish.
What's number one?
Probably overall largemouth bass. Region-wide or range-wide is what I mean to say. You know, bass are in Southern California now. They introduced them there. Bass are well known from Georgia and Mississippi and those states, and it's the number one fish. So I'd say that's still probably the number one game fish by most people's standards. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What about disease in fish? I mean, I hear a lot of people saying, well, you know, it's like, if I caught a fish, I wouldn't really eat it from there. How much is that true and how much of it is?
Well, disease, I'm assuming what you mean is poisons, like
Poisons.
PCBs and any of that kind of stuff. See, the fish naturally have a lot of different kinds of diseases. They're usually parasitic. Most things that people see are the little grubs that might be in sunfish, especially along the back. You know, those are nothing. Pop them out with your finger, or take a knife and pop them out, and go ahead and eat your fish if you can't stand the little grubs. But if you're talking about things like PCBs and the materials that are in Bigfoot Lorsban or whatever like that, the state departments of health, every state has one. They monitor mercury levels and that kind of residual pesticides and things like that. So that there is information that is available, and if they detect something that is above whatever standard that has been set, that information is public and you can find it online. So you shouldn't have any trouble finding it if something really bothers you. How bad do I think the problem is? I think it depends on where you live and goes on in your part of the world. There's a lot of pretty nasty ag chemicals that get sprayed around here. Makes me very concerned. Nitrogen has been a big issue. Too much nitrogen in your water can give babies the blue color disease. Some of you might have heard about blue babies from too much nitrates in the water. So there's a lot of stuff out there. Stay informed by getting online and finding out what's the very latest. I eat a lot of fish. I eat fish out of the lakes around Omaha. The reason I do is because they're tested all the time, and the results come out, and according to their test, there's nothing wrong with them. The worst places are the Missouri and Mississippi River, because that's the catch-all for everything that we don't. There's those, you might have heard of forever chemicals. It's been in the news some. Forever chemicals are spotty. It depends on what industry is along the river or stream banks. But one of the worst places that I know is actually in the state of Georgia. It's hot with forever chemicals, and I wouldn't eat nothing from those rivers down there. Nebraska, generally pretty good, except for ag chemicals. Just watch the ag chemicals and the nitrates. If you're well informed and you know what's where, I wouldn't be too worried. Yes?
When you're stocking fish, how do you determine which fish you put in certain lakes or ponds, or do you go in and monitor, sort of take a test to see what's going on in the bodies of water?
Yeah, the general routine is for the lakes that, let's say this is Nebraska Game and Parks. They've got 2 or 3 crews of biologists. That's their primary job, is to go out, sample fish communities, fish populations, get a measure of age and growth, get a measure of what's their size distribution or age distribution, taking all that information, synthesizing it, and then deciding, well, there's too many of species X, Y, or Z. We think that we can control, or we think we can change the amount of biomass represented by those fish that maybe anglers aren't using, by introducing a different type of predator or changing the size distribution or size limits. So there's all these different tools available to the fisheries managers to manipulate those things. The problem is they don't happen overnight. Those changes usually take years before something changes dramatically. But that's the tools that we use. Does that make sense? Is there anything not clear?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. I was a research biologist, so I didn't do too much of that. But there's management biologists. That's their job, is to go out to Flanagan Lake or the lakes around Omaha, sample the fish populations, look at the size distribution, look at their age and growth and see how they're growing, then make adjustments with stocking rates or adding a different kind of predator or prey, so that they can shift that up so where anglers are happy that they're catching nice fish.
Yeah.
That's their job. It just doesn't happen overnight. Those things take 3, 4, 5 years sometimes before the results really are something that you're happy with. Yeah.